Welcome to The Choice. This is Kurt Doolittle, Episode 9. The Second Amendment in Strictly Constructed Law to help you understand what we do here. I thought I'd take a moment to illustrate the clarity that Propertarian strict construction of law brings to one of your favorite subjects, the Second Amendment. And yes, it's a bit of clickbait because I could have chosen something far less interesting. We state pretty openly that the commons are formed by those willing to use violence to produce and defend them. That means that those who are willing to fight to produce and defend the commons share ownership in those commons. We build everything in our Constitution and our law and our civilization brick by brick upon the law of self-determination, reciprocity, and sovereignty under the law to preserve it. That includes the reciprocal exchange of the right to self-determination in all of life. Self-determination requires sovereignty under the law, and limiting display word and deed to reciprocity is the only means of surviving under that law. And markets in all walks of life are the only means of limiting ourselves to reciprocity, sovereignty, and self-determination. And it turns out that markets under the rule of law of reciprocity are the fastest possible means of both evolving a polity and evolving the suppression of crimes that would undermine it. But self-determination isn't possible without the organized use of violence to defend it from the endless river of usurpers seeking every possible means to impose their control upon others for some excuse they favor or another, and thereby ending our requirement that everything we do be limited to reciprocity and markets, and that even all government is also limited to constructing exchanges in a market for commons, as we did in the Anglo-civilization, at least until recently. And if it can't be done by exchange, then it can't be done without treason against the Constitution, the law it's built upon, and the people who defend them both. So the first right upon which all other rights depend is the right to bear arms in defense of private and common. To hold the right to arms, it must include a right that clearly expresses its terms. It must include an obligation to defend self, family, and commons with those arms, with that right. It must include the inalienability of that right and the obligation, meaning not only may others not take it without punishment, but you can't surrender it either without punishment. And lastly, we must state the punishment for anyone who tries. So let's compare the existing Second Amendment that only states a right and kind of unclearly in its terms with the Propertarian Institute's equivalent in our new revised or strengthened Constitution. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What they were concerned about was that they weren't really concerned about the fact that people already carried arms and that the militia or the tendency to recruit people for fighting in armies was an ongoing civilizational matter. They were really concerned that the militia exist as a means to opposing the state that they were empowering. But so it didn't really what happened is these terms aren't clear enough to prohibit the various attacks on it. So let's go to the Propertarian version, under the heading Defense of Interests, Rights, and Obligations. 1. The right and obligation to keep, bear, and use arms. I. The right and obligation of all citizens to keep, bear, and use any and all arms individually preferred, functionally sufficient, and strategically necessary for personal, familial, common, commercial, civil, and military defense at all times without exceptions shall not be infringed. The obligation of all citizens between 16 and 65 to keep and bear necessary and sufficient arms and ammunition, and to remain disciplined in their use, and fit to use them in defense of the people and their interests, whether by personal initiative, civic request, militial, or military service, shall not be infringed. The inalienability of the citizen's right and obligation to keep arms, bear arms, and use arms, an obligation to remain fit for, perform service in, the citizen's militia and the military shall not be infringed. Any and all attempts by display, word, or deed to alienate a citizen or citizens, or attempt at alienation by a citizen or citizens from the right and obligation to keep and bear those arms, remain fit for, and perform services in the militia and the military, shall constitute an act of treason punishable by death. So you mean, this is why we're so fussy about language. We make armored laws for armored men. I hope that one's a little comforting to you, and I hope it puts our work into perspective. The entire Constitution is written in this kind of rigorous form, although it only gets online as I feel comfortable with it. So I hope that puts our work into perspective. Everything we do is to defend the European way of life against the enemies who would deprive us of our self-determination. Self-determination which is unique to European peoples and which other people fear because they are not able to take responsibility for it. This is Kurt Doolittle for the Propertarian Institute. Thank you for listening to The Choice.